So today, I'm going to share a story with you. This is a story of a sweet guy. He was born on 14th November 1983. He was intelligent. He was sweet. He was the smartest guy I ever knew. You would find that he had a good job. He had a good career. He studied well. He was on the verge of getting engaged and then getting married. But I was the one who used to always make him vulnerable, shameful, and put him into acute depression. I made him suffer from chronic depression for 11 years of his life. 27 years he felt he was trapped. And on 7th April 2011, he attempted suicide. So putting the rope on the fan and the other end into his neck, he thought this would be the way to end, and perhaps this was a better end. 19 out of 20 people who attempt suicide normally fail. And 37% of those 19 try to reinvent themselves and come back to life. Well, he did the same thing. He reinvented himself, but this time he did not do anything which somebody would try to do just to get temporary happiness. He convinced himself, he accepted that there was someone else that was living inside him since the day he was born. It was at the age of 6 he realized that it was not what others thought he was. There was some awakening inside him which always forced him to do what others never wanted him to do, what others stopped him from doing. And that was the beginning when he realized he was different. And perhaps it brought a stigma at the age of 13, at the age of 14, at the age of 18, at the age of 21. At every moment, it was this stigma. At every moment, it was this kind of entrapment that made him feel that he was not perhaps worthy of being amongst what we call as normal. So he attempted suicide, but he tried to reinvent himself, and acting as a very courageous person, he gave me life. I'm 9 months old. I was born on 16th March 2012 at Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital in Andheri, Mumbai. He was a very courageous person. He killed himself just to save me. Very few of us understand that some or the other kind of mental illness or a mental condition has to be treated well. And one of the most tragic mental illnesses that has been recorded in DSM-4 is gender identity crisis. It's such a situation in which the person who's assigned a gender at birth never feels the person of that particular gender and is not able to associate with the others around him or her for their entire life. That is the feeling of entrapment. That is the feeling that made him always crave for liberty, crave for freedom. Even when he had everything, even when he had every material happiness, everything physical that anybody would long for, whether it was money, whether it was facilities, whether it was anything for that matter. He dedicated himself to studies. He studied well, but at the end of the day, he always felt that there was more need to spread awareness. And that is why he entered into lecturership. He made it as an assistant professor. And he stayed in that job for 6 years. But this gender identity crisis that was there in his mind, whenever I'll speak to him, he'll try to shut me up. When I'll tell him to do something, he'll tell me, no, 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 this is not approved. This cannot be done. This is not a subject. And that is where all the times you would find that he would try to hide himself. He would try to hide himself from everyone around him. And he would shut me up. He would always keep on fighting with me. So when I fell in love with some guy, he did not approve of it. And that did cost him a lot. It was at that time that I forced him and pressured him into mental depression, acute chronic depression. During those 3 years, I saw him suffering. During those 3 years of not being able to do what others were trying to tell him to do. Of course, our society and our social setup makes us, decided time periods for everything. Well, there was a time when he had to get engaged. There was a time when he had to get married. And when he couldn't say no, he got engaged. But then I did collapse him. It was this particular problem, this particular illness, that increased so much in his mind that he was not able to concentrate on anything at all. Finally, he gave me away. He said, "You're going to be with me forever in the life, and I would not be able to do what others tell me to do, and that is why he allowed me to come into this particular world and live and make him happy and make all other people also happy." Transitioning into a gender of your own desire, transitioning into a gender of your own choice is almost a taboo. When you want to do that, people would ask why. There's no need. People associate this with sexuality, sexual orientation, homosexuality, transgenderism. But I don't know why nobody thinks that it is never about gender. It is about identity. It is not about sexual orientation. It is about who you are and not who you should be. It is not about being perfect, but it is about trying perfection. It was this vulnerability, the idea of being weak. Normally when we are vulnerable, we find ourselves into some or the other kind of entrapment, and perhaps we are not able to come out of it. But then he realized that this vulnerability was not actually weakness. This vulnerability was a measurement for the courage that he should show. This vulnerability was actually adaptability for change. And so it is necessary that we all realize that we are vulnerable. By being vulnerable, it's not that we are weak. It means that we realize what that weakness is, and then try to adapt ourselves to change that weakness into a strength. Shame, I remember. But shame and guilt, they are two very different things. I can be shameful, but I don't want to be guilty. So when I say I made a mistake and I'll fix it and that's it, perhaps I'm trying to come out of that guilt emotion. But when I say I have been making mistakes and I realize that even if I try to correct them, they would never actually be corrected. Now that's how you realize being shameful. Shame could be associated with empathy. Guilt is associated with sympathy. And he realized that he doesn't want anybody's sympathy. Well, when he decided that I should finally come out, it's not a very easy process. He had increased to the level of the highest masculinity that anybody could ever see. He was very handsome, very cute, very sweet. That particular guy that we were trying to look into earlier, you would find that whatever he had established, whatever he had achieved, till the time he did not share it with me, he never found himself to be happy. And finally, he decided to come out. And he devoted his time. Because deciding priorities is important. It is going to stay with you for the rest of the life. After 1 year of extensive counseling, you would be put upon the hormones. It would be seen whether they are working on you, how they could be changed. What you see me right now, had you seen me maybe 18 months ago, I was very different. It was completely different. And then the painful gender reassignment surgery, where the actual conversion takes place. And within the next few years, you would find that you would change into the person of your desired gender. The question is, why to go through this whole process? Is there a necessity? You could live happily as you are. No, there is a necessity. Because the greatest peace that you could get in the world is when you're at peace with yourself. And when you're at peace with yourself, you'll definitely be kinder and gentler to everybody around you, only if you could be kinder and gentler with yourself. Yes, for some years of his life, he was blaming others. Oh, this was the wrong person. Oh, he did wrong, or she did wrong, whatever. But then during those counseling days, he realized that blaming is actually a kind of expression of not being able to respond, when the response is actually in your own hands. And that is why he stopped blaming. He realized that it was necessary not to think in terms of short term, but to think in terms of longer term. And even if that decision comes out to be regrettable, it would be better to live with that regret, rather than living a life full of pretense, falsified emotions. Many of us try to numb emotions. We try to numb the emotions like, oh, this is grief, this is sadness. And he used to do all those things. But then he decided that instead of numbing those decisions, freezing them, freezing those emotions, it was better that he acknowledges everything that he felt. And only then it would make him happier. Well, he actually did not kill himself. He showed courage and gave me a way to come forward and talk to you people, to make you understand, or perhaps create some kind of an awareness that it is not about gender, it is about identity. And you should not be what you should be, but you should be what you are. And we should all be what we always are. Why is it that if I break my arm, I gather a lot of attention, I gather a lot of sympathy? But when my mind gets affected, then I get a stigma. After all, emotional weakness or emotional wound is more difficult to get healed than a physical wound. Because perhaps physical system is so automatic that it heals itself. But the emotional wound is such that it needs a lot of time to heal, a lot of support to heal. I'm really happy that my parents accepted this form of me, that my neighbors accepted this form of me, that I got a leave of 2 years from my institute saying you come back as a new person because you were the one who developed the campus and you need to come back. I was happy when I received a lot of acceptance from my employers. And I'm happy to be amongst you today. The greatest truth of this 21st century, I would say, the modern day world is that each one of us will survive. All of us will survive. But I don't want to survive. I want to live. So we all survive. But each one of us should ask every day, each day, did I live today? Thank you.